And so it seems like you are probably the preeminent sex researcher on the planet in terms of the numbers you're dealing with. Is that true? You think that's right?
Well, in terms of sample size, yeah.
And empirical research.
I think this is true. Both personal
and field research as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are extremely excited to have Aella on the pod, a guest who, among other things, defies basically every attempt I could muster at some sort of succinct description. I toyed with a lot of things. I toyed with writer, sex researcher, sex worker, infrequent showerer, inventor of Asshole, which I own, by the way, which is great.
Wow.
Introducer of fluffers to the wider world, and mime. So yeah, instead of me failing, maybe I'll just ask you to introduce yourself. Like, how would you introduce what you do to
I have the same problem. I really have the same problem. I'm like, I don't understand what is what my headphones just fucked up. Okay. I don't understand what is salient to other people. What is like the problem. Usually I just say like sex researcher, and then sometimes I say sex worker, depending on who I'm talking to.
Yeah, so I think the majority of the chat today will be about your sex research, which is amazing, and we really want to dive into the details. But I kind of want to give the audience who doesn't know you a bit of a flavor of your other side. And so you wrote recently a blog post that was quite raw and touching that resonated with me, and I think will resonate with a lot of our audience as well. The title of which was "My Birthday Gangbang," which yes. I thought was fucking hilarious. And I'm so glad that it has introduced Sankey diagrams to the wider world, because they are criminally underappreciated. But so I had a bit more of a serious question about that in a sec, but I figured maybe because it's kind of going viral on Twitter at the moment, and it's probably slightly top of mind, that we could talk about that.
Sure.
Yeah, so maybe just explain to the audience your birthday party.
Yeah, so my birthday party was so basically I've been running these orgies, and at a couple of the orgies I got like just held down and railed by a bunch of guys in a row. And this was fantastic. I felt like I was on a high for a couple of days afterwards. And like, this is now one of my sexual fantasies. And so my partner, hearing this, was like, maybe we should amplify a whole bunch of people fucking you in one night, see how many we can get. We could just have like everybody runs the train on Aella birthday party. And this was scary, but I was like, okay. And then he basically set it all up for me and like tracked a whole bunch of things about it. And then we did the gangbang. It was lovely. And then I did a write-up about it later, and then people lost their goddamn minds.
Yeah, because that's what I'm curious about. Like, what has the pushback been on Twitter?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. So one, I'm terrible at anticipating the way people are going to interpret my words. I have historically gotten myself into problems with this because I don't think through. And so, like, I was talking about how scary the gangbang is, which it was terrifying. But to me, that's not a big deal. We do terrifying things all the time. I'm always pushing myself to do scary shit. So I didn't think about it. I was just like, yeah, I was like internally screaming while I was like heading to this event. And people were like, oh my God, she's like self-forcing herself into something terrible. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of like, oh, this is self-harm. She's like damaging herself in some way. Or she's like ignoring, her actual preferences. So I went and I edited the blog post to try and make it a little clearer. I'm like, no, this is not, I'm very in touch with what I want. There's a reason I'm throwing very particular orgies, because I have like finally come to terms with my sexual preferences. So there's a lot of like, oh, it's joyless. Like, why is she doing this political affair? And then of course, a bunch of people who are just disgusted. They're like, or what is our society coming to? Liberal democracy, the end of our civilization or whatever, despite me not even being that liberal. So that was like mostly the class of responses, I think.
Yeah, because privately I've heard people say it's like repressed trauma and stuff. And in my mind, I was like, I don't think it is. I think it's, and tell me if this is accurate or not, but my comparison was more like extreme sports or something, like an Alex Honnold trying to climb the Yellowstone rock face without a rope. And it's just pushing your interests to their absolute maximum. How close is that? How not close is that?
I think it's closer. I mean, it's just even having interests at all. Like, I would say that you see more strange sexual behavior in the absence of trauma, because so much of our culture is like, gives you a pretty standard thing. Like, oh, typically it's a monogamous relationship and you have like relatively vanilla sex and sometimes you pull out fuzzy handcuffs. All right. And if you do anything outside of this, we're like more upset about it. And so like, if you go outside of this, you recognize that that is your desire and you engage in it anyway, despite social pushback. This is not this is unlikely to be trauma, I think, but it can be also like a result of self-fulfillment or self-actualization, which for me, this is my journey because I was raised very Christian, homeschooled. And I was like, all right, women don't like sex that much. I'm going to be a wife and good wife and who just gives her husband sex whenever she wants. And it's not about my pleasure. It's about a duty I have to perform. And going from that, so then I was just having sex for years where I was in various ways subconsciously repressing to myself my actual preferences during sex. I was having very normal sex with one person. I was not doing anything like super freaky. I was like a sex worker, sure, but in my personal sex life. And then it was after I became an escort that I finally started to feel more emboldened to own my sexual preferences. Is as an escort, you're constantly sacrificing your sexual preferences for somebody else. I went like hard on the like, oh, I am just like a sex doll to become your ideal fantasy. And then when I was doing that in work, in my personal life, I was like, I have absolutely no space anymore to do any of that. Not even a little bit. I'm not going to warp or compromise or push down what I want at all. And it destroyed like a sexual relationship I had at the time, which was founded on some sort of compromise there, which like, so maybe it has some downsides. But after that, I got wilder in what I wanted because I'm like, wait, what do I want? What do I actually want? Independent of what I'm supposed to want. And it became just freaky shit. Just random freaky shit. Orgies, gangbangs getting railed on me, like act like fantasy kink stuff being acted out. And so people say it's a result of trauma. I'm like, all the normal stuff was a result of trauma. This stuff is like me finally figuring out who I am. Yeah.
But was the gangbang a fantasy in the same way that other things are fantasies? Or is it more just like can I do such a monumentous event?
The Mount Olympus of sexual events.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I was like a little bit of column A, column B. Like, I didn't know how much I was going to like it. I had some evidence that I was going to like it based on previous experiences, but they were a slightly different context. So a little bit, it was just like kind of novel, like, let's just do this crazy thing and see how many cocks we can do it. But separately, I was like, maybe I am going to really love this. Maybe I'm going to feel like a dirty slut or whatever.
Yeah, the last thought I had about the gangbang is like, I could totally see the appeal of a polyamorous lifestyle or like an orgy for sure. But like, I cannot get in the headspace of enjoying a gangbang from the male perspective in the sense that like, I don't like small talk and I just can't imagine standing in line, fluffing yourself, waiting your 3 minutes for your that would just, I would crawl out of my fucking skin and just jump out of a window. But because I know you did psychological screening or like not psychological, but you did screening of the men, right? Mm-hmm. And like, what kind of guys are into gangbangs?
I mean, if you're doing like, what can we predict about people's sexual preferences based on other shit? It's not very predictive. Most stuff isn't. The thing that's probably most predictive of a gangbang thing is like correlation with basically other multiple partners. So they tend to be more polyamorous, tend to be more interested, watch porn where it's like a bunch of people at once. That would be the best predictor. But I mean, it's just a kink for some people. And some people, it's not a kink. They just want to be part of it. Like a lot of people had trouble getting hard, which is presumably they would be of your archetype.
Yeah.
Someone who's like, wow, it turns out that this is kind of unsexy. I think people didn't understand what it was going to be like before they got there.
Yeah, my favorite line from the blog post, and then we can move on, was the virgin who yelled Leroy Jenkins before diving in. Like that cherry on the top. That was amazing.
To have the presence of mind to actually pull that off is extraordinary. Like, good on that guy.
Yeah, that guy was incredible. And he gave me a surreal experience because I was like, oh, this must be real weird for him when he approached. And then he yelled, Leroy Jenkins. I'm like, okay, the tables are turned. I am now in weird dreamland. I'm very grateful for him because normally people don't out-weird me. So
yeah, that's
very impressive.
That guy's got a bright sexual future ahead of him.
Oh,
okay, so you know what? So actually we touched on the topic of cultural pushback, and I wanted to get there a little later, but I think now, maybe I'll just bring it up now. So I can predict that you'd receive pushback from sort of at least two distinct parts of the culture. One would just be sort of traditional social conservatives who would have trouble with it for obvious reasons. And then the second one is sort of a more burgeoning online movement, sometimes called like neo-trad, which is perhaps like a set of typically younger people, often seems male skewed, who think that basically like sexual liberation has been damaging for both men and women for a variety of reasons. And they look at, for instance, like the decline of fertility rates and decline of like traditional family structure and stuff. And so this is sort of my sense is it's a more online type of movement who wants to like revert to more traditional archetypes in relationships. One, I guess, do I have those two poles of pushback correct? And then two, I guess, which one do you actually, if so, which one do you encounter more often in practice?
I'm not sure. I think in most terms, they actually functionally are kind of the same. Like both of them will say like things like, oh, this is the decay of society. Because like, you know, the neo-trads are very concerned with, like, if I'm going to stereotype, like you Roman things where, you know, that's like a good civilization. Not that Rome was really that conservative.
Didn't they have slaves?
Yeah, and lots of weird deviant sex.
Yeah, seriously.
But also, I mean, like when I was Christian and I was growing up, we would talk about like, you know, gay normalization of gays was leading to the downfall of society. So I don't know. I think like in practice, they seem very similar. It's just that neo-trads usually seems more aesthetically based, and like actual trads seem more like deeply principle based or something. Like neo-trads usually don't literally believe the religion. They sort of are LARPing at a religious principles without being like, oh, the Bible is true or whatever. They don't like literally believe in Jesus Christ as their savior.
I see.
They just want sort of some sort of meaning making structure.
I see. Okay, so that explains. Yeah, so I've definitely noticed people in that sphere often gravitate towards something like Catholicism or something like Mormonism, maybe if they came from like an atheist style upbringing. And so that makes sense. They're looking for some sort of like meaning making type of community. Do you encounter? So my sense is this is mostly online. Like I have encountered huge neo-trad movements in person, but maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places. So do you actually encounter people like this in the wild, or is this mostly just pushback you receive online?
Yeah, I mean, this is not great. I was like, oh, look, I'm in liberal la la land where nobody gives a shit that I'm a sex worker. It's great. And then I moved to Austin, and then, like, it's been different. Like, I was going to, like, a meetup here for people who were sort of, like, I don't want to say anti-woke, but it was sort of, like, we're kind of, like, what
IDW.
Thank you. It was like that adjacent. It was, you know, like sort of red pilled adjacent. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty like the woke people freaking hate me, so I'll go to this thing where you're discussing like crazy ideas. And then I accidentally just completely decimated the group with my presence because we had a whole split over whether or not it was okay to have a sex worker there.
Oh, wow.
And so it just
that's just like trad then, I guess, like traditional conservatives.
No, those are neo-trads.
Oh, interesting. Okay, but
it was young kids who like were LARPing being religious, at least in my opinion.
Okay. Oh,
I'm like maybe not the right person because I was raised actually religious. So from my perspective, a lot of people are LARPing it, although other people might consider them genuinely religious. So it's just, I don't know. So yeah, in that community, like divided into two, there was like a religious subset that didn't want me, and then like a subset that like did want me, but then the subset that did want me just ended up not meeting because it's too dramatic, and now there's just a conservative subset. And that's just one. There's been like another social group that's also
what a fragile social group.
I know. I wasn't even doing anything. They were just like, are we going to tolerate her talking publicly about what she does? Anyway, I think it's just like men who are like really afraid of experiencing sexual arousal at the wrong things. Like my guess is there's a lot of shame going on. Like they feel bad about their sexuality.
Wow. And so I'm assuming you noticed this much more in Austin than you did in SF? Is that true?
Yeah. I never had a single problem in SF. And in Austin, suddenly it was like, oh, why am I not getting invited to this party? All of my friends are going. And they're like, well, we're not allowed to bring you. The guy throwing it is neo.
Shitty.
Yeah.
Has it made you rethink the move to Austin at all?
Oh, yeah. I want to leave. Yeah, it's not great. So, yeah, I guess it's just a reminder that there's a stigma. But, I mean, this is why it's part of the job, right? I think it's part of why it's so fulfilling to be public about it, just because I'm, like, helping bring meaningful acceptance to other people who might be living in conservative cultures who feel afraid.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess on that note, do you feel like because it seems like you've been quite immune from cancellation from woke and from the woke and from otherwise. Do you think that's just because you have pretty significant cultural sway in certain quarters, or like have people tried to cancel you, or what's been your experience of that and like your hypothesis for why you're sort of uncancelable?
I mean, what does cancellation mean? Typically, people they try and like hit you where it hurts a bit. They're like, oh, we're going to like culturally pressure the social institutions you rely on to sever your connection with those connections. And I'm like, what are they going to do for me? Like, what connections do I have that they're going to sever? And the people have kind of tried. Like, the most effective attempt at cancellation, I would say, was when people somehow noticed that a lot of my revenue stream goes coming from Reddit. And so they went to the mods of the various subreddits and then were complaining to them about me. Yeah. And this is just porn. Like, there was nothing ideological. I was just my Reddit account posting nudes. There was nothing controversial about it, but they were like, and which is like, honestly, props to them, because that was like a very clever way of thinking, of like understanding how my financial flow was. And this was some years ago or whatever. But but now I don't rely on that. Now my income is like mostly Substack. So, and Substack is cool. Substack allows way more controversial people than me to stay on it.
Yeah, true. Okay. Speaking of your Substack, let's dive in a bit to the survey research and the sex research in general. Maybe just I'll set this up for the audience a bit. So sex research traditionally in academia is hard for presumably a number of reasons. One is just getting big sample sizes of anonymous people who are willing to tell you things, both because you have to go through IRB approval. You have to deal with like cultural norms of people telling you things, then you have to deal with just like social norms, people like breaking social norms and stuff. And academia tends to not be so great at that. And so my sense is the state of sex research before you came along was like quite mediocre and and not replete with giant studies with big sample sizes and stuff. And then you sort of burst onto the scene on Twitter and took advantage of their anonymous poll functionality and are now gathering like data from thousands of people who are willing to tell you all sorts of things about fetishes and whatnot. And sort of you turn this into an industry about exploring people's sexual preferences, people's relationship preferences, and all this sorts of stuff. And so it seems like you are probably the preeminent sex researcher on the planet in terms of the numbers you're dealing with. Is that true? You think that's right?
Well, in terms of sample size, yeah.
And empirical research.
This is true. Both personal
and field research as well.
Definitely. And just a small clarification, my research is not Twitter polls. Twitter polls is like occasionally I use it to get clues. Basically, I use it as like sort of like alpha testing. So I'll ask a question in a Twitter poll, and then people will critique the phrasing of it in the comments. No, every time. So I get to see all the ways people like misinterpret a question. Or I get to see like just very lightly test because often you want questions that sort of divide audiences, not like 99% to 1%, because it's kind of a useless question. I mean, unless you're intentionally measuring something very rare. So sometimes I will like test questions just to make sure that it's a phrasing that is splitting things in a way that's useful. So this is mostly what my Twitter poll function serves, but most of my actual surveys are built with guided tracking.
Oh, I see. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a lot of data and a lot of research. One recent series that you've started putting out is like the Good at Sex series, which is walking guys through a lot of ways to get laid and women's sexual preferences and whatnot. And I'd like to talk about some general lessons from that. But before I do, I have some very specific questions that occurred to me while I was reading it. We won't give too much away because it's obviously behind a paywall, so we don't want to talk too extensively about it. But in part 6 of the series, you have some data where you ask women to rank various sexual acts on a scale from 0 to 100 about how much they'll like it. And then you ask men to predict how much they think women will like it, right? So in some sense, you're asking how well calibrated are men towards women's sexual preferences in bed. This is obviously talking about hetero couples, etc. So when you look at this plot, it's interesting to look at, and it's interesting to look at the things where men are less calibrated. But if you zoom out, the plot axes in terms of men's calibration is actually between plus and minus 10% in terms of their prediction, or I guess how far they are off from how, how women rank the sexual thing. This strikes me actually as men being quite calibrated on average. I was kind of shocked by the fact that it's within plus or minus 10 percentage points for all these things. And so, was this surprising to you? What's going on here?
No, you're absolutely correct.
So why aren't men, I guess given this, why aren't men better in bed maybe is the right question to ask here? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, so what is what men predict that women want? And you're right that it's very rare that it goes outside of like roughly 10%. Although it's like, it is also kind of meaningful to, like, if 100% of women like a thing, but people predict only 90% of women like it, that's a little bit more meaningful than like 40 versus 60. I don't know, like bell curves or whatever. But I think the more interesting thing is a little bit like less what men predicted, more what men do. Like, I think this is why women are maybe less satisfied, because it's, to some degree, it's not that men don't know what women want. It's that men aren't acting on it. Like a very easy example is like men being hard during sex. Men know that women want this, but men sometimes do not have control over being able to do this. So this could lead to the disparity in why women are really upset. But some of them are men like don't know that women want it to the degree that women say that they want it. And this is reflected in the actions. Like in the marketplace of sex acts, we see that women report that men are really not that like dominant, aggressive as much as they would like to be. And to be clear, so this is a little bit bimodal. A lot of women really don't want men to be like this at all. But overall, women are like, man, I would love to be like handled roughly a bit. And then men are like, oh, women just, sorry, not men, the women, but then they're like, but men just aren't doing this as much as we would prefer they do.
Maybe we're in like a good world in the sense that men have a decent idea of what women want, and now we just have to encourage men to actually do those things. Like they're not doing it out of either like fear or ability instead of not knowing what's going on, which is perhaps arguably better than them not knowing what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on some subtypes. Like overall, I think men do typical mind fallacy a little bit. Like if you're a guy and you get aroused by seeing a bunch of like hot women stripping and then being really horny, you're like, oh, well, a woman must be aroused by like a bunch of like hot men stripping. Like I think I don't understand why men don't read romance novels. Like if I were a girl who wanted to be good at sex, I would go watch like the kind of porn that the men I was interested were watching. But like men just don't go read romance novels. That's just absolutely insane.
The training data is there.
It really is.
What's going on here? And then did you come up with all the actual sexual acts that you ask about? Did you come up with all of these? Like, and I'm hoping the head in the toilet one was just like to make sure everyone's calibrated, or like what's going on here? Is there a subtype that likes head in the toilet?
To make sure everyone was calibrated, but also that did happen to me once. Like I shoved my head in the toilet. God. It's not my kink, but like I'm glad he tried it. I'm like pro experimentation. Yeah. The one interesting thing is that men who watch porn tend to be better at predicting what women like during sex, which is very counter to what most people the standard narratives.
Yeah, because isn't there a conversation, I don't know how true this is, that like porn is giving a lot of men unrealistic standards about what to expect in bed? Have you heard this story in the culture? And I guess this data is kind of cuts against this.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is that porn is giving men unrealistic expectations about how they're supposed to behave during sex. Like you're supposed to have like incredible stamina and like a hard cock that never falters and just be like pounding. I mean, to be fair, I think like they are not properly weighting cunnilingus. Like that does seem kind of wrong. I'm not saying that there aren't any misinformation coming. I'm just saying that overall, men who watch porn seem to. But the thing is, like, men who watch porn tend to prefer more violent sex, which is what women like. So if a guy watches porn, he's like more willing to update towards roughness and thus actually satisfy women. And again, women are different. I'm not saying all women prefer rough. Some women really hate it. So it's like a high risk, high reward thing.
Yeah. And if you ask your partner which of the two modes they're in, does that kind of ruin the impact? Like, should it be not talked about and just done, or should it be a discussion beforehand?
I think it depends quite a lot on the kind of person. If you're really sexually repressed, like for me, when I was 21, I would not have been willing to admit that I was into it because I was so ashamed. Now you should talk to me about it. So it depends a lot on like, you have to sort of feel the lady, be like, you should definitely try to talk about it. But generally people this is one of the few areas where women are actually bimodal. Like you're not going to see a lot of ladies in the middle with like only a few who extremely like it and only a few who don't like it at all. It's like either you hate it or you love it. So it's like, it should be relatively easy to figure out which bin somebody falls into.
I see. Yeah. Because you can kind of maybe slowly ramp up, read cues, and then ramp down if you're dealing with the wrong mode.
Yeah. And ideally, you talk about it. Like if a girl hasn't figured out her own preferences, like at some point she does have responsibility to bear for that.
Yeah. Interesting. So I want to talk about one fetish in particular and maybe set it up a little bit. So in preparation for this conversation, I had a conversation with a friend of mine's partner who's a cam girl. And I just kind of want to get some insight into her world and kind of ask a bunch of dumb questions so that I hopefully didn't ask too many dumb questions in this conversation. And she told me about this thing called findom. You know much about findom?
Yeah.
So I've been rabbit holing really hard on this, and I really want to discuss it with you. But perhaps you should set it up for the audience. And so let's assume our audience, like me, had never heard of what findom is. And then let's discuss, because I kind of have some strong opinions about this now, which I didn't think I would. So I would love to.
You might know just as much about it as I do. Like, I haven't done a deep dive in my own research on it yet. I've just been around some girls who do it, but I've never done it myself. Yeah, but findom is it's like a sexual kink where a guy is interested in a woman sort of extracting money from him through various ways, like dominating him.
Financial domination, I guess.
Yeah. So she'll call him like pay pigs and be like, you're good for nothing. You're only good for, buying me presents, and I'll step on you with my heels that you bought from me kind of scenario. Which is, I think, like often women's fantasy. Women often are like, oh man, if I could only just be a findomer. It sounds like a really easy way to make money. But from what I hear, it's actually harder than you think, which makes sense. Market stabilizes.
Wait, so do they give I guess they don't give the money back after, right? So they do this thing, and then it's like...
Yeah, so if Aella was a findom and I was her pay pig, or quote, human ATM, there's a number of these, then I would text Aella and say something like, my princess, I'm not worthy of your affection, and here's my tributes to you, kind of thing. And then she would call me a piece of shit and then ask for more money. And then call me another piece of shit and then ask for more money, because there's very much a dominant submission thing happening. Okay, so that's what I was told. And that's kind of the intro to the subject. And so when you Google findom, or financial domination, on YouTube, you see a bunch of like videos of 19 to 23-year-olds talking about how to drain their subs. And it's kind of this like light bubbly thing that is kind of joked about. But then if you start Googling like findom abuse or findom harm or findom addiction, then you get pushed to a very different area of the internet. And that's when I started taking a deep interest in this, because if you do a bit of a controlled experiment and you type in like findom addiction Reddit, and you can compare it to like sex addiction Reddit, or gambling addiction Reddit, or porn addiction Reddit, what you see is that the findom posts don't stop. They keep going. And when it becomes an addiction, then it becomes very, very dark, very quickly. And so to kind of demonstrate that, I wanted to show a 3-minute clip. And so let's play that, and then we'll come back and have some kind of comments afterwards. But I'd love to get your reactions to it.
Yeah. So let me get this right. So you wake up at, say, to like 3 a.m. to some texts from a woman in America.
Yeah.
And she's like abusing you. She's giving you shit. She's like, and then she's like, oh, by the way, for me to do this, you now owe me £100.
Oh, well, she's worse. She'll keep going and getting worse. And she'll say, I hate you, and you're never going to be rid of me. She literally, I mean, even now, I managed, after a certain really dark incident happened about Easter, I haven't messaged her since. Well, she keeps going on how she's going to ruin me, destroy my life, basically drive me to suicide. And I mean, she goes on and on. It really like bombards you with it. And this is over, months and months, almost constantly. Quite often she'll do it in the middle of the night as well. So you're sort of, half asleep and a bit woozy, and she'll just keep doing it and doing it. And then she'll get you to take shots sometimes as well. So you're drunk while she's doing it to you. And she just somehow gets in your head. But I mean, she then starts sending photographs of people cutting themselves and things and razor blades. And then she's like, you want to. And then she keeps going on. And then eventually she demanded that I send her $500. And at the moment I pressed send, I had to get a razor blade and cut my arm here. Now, I've never done that before. I've never, ever been into self-harming in any way. But I did do it. I've still got a slight scar on my arm. And that's from 3 months ago. It still hasn't quite gone. Because I'd never done it before, I must have cut too deep. It didn't stop bleeding for ages. It was terrifying. But after that, that's when I drew the line. And I've tried to stay away from it. Because, I mean, that messed with my head for a few days afterwards. I was just like I was thinking, how the hell can this have happened? How could I have gone that far? I mean, there's fun, and then there's whatever the hell happened there. That's like way
Does your
over a
wife
line.
understand the extent that this has been taken to?
Well, she knows about that because, I mean, I literally ended up calling her in because we had to try and stop it bleeding. I mean, it was dreadful. I mean, the cut was quite deep, so it literally did not want to stop. So she understands the extent physically, although I don't think she quite grasps quite how much has gone financially. But at the same time, it's nothing that would have just been money put aside. It's not money that, has directly affected her life.
So I have some comments about this, but I would love to hear your reflections, and then I'll maybe contextualize a little bit why I think this is an interesting subject.
Yeah. So one, I actually have not read I'm in a whole bunch of weird subreddits for fetishes. I actually have not seen the pay big addiction one. There's definitely fetishes that have dark sides. Like, for example, if you're into scat, this has like a lot of physical harm associated with it. And this seems probably like one of them, like a lot of financial harm that you can get into if you're not very careful. I feel like slightly weird about this specific clip though, because, maybe I need to read the context, because often like when people get off on being abused, they will ask for it. Like, you'll get texts as a girl being like, tell me I'm a worthless piece of shit. Like, and so without the context, it makes it sound like just a random abuser is abusing him, when probably that woman has been like, has guys begging her like for insults of this kind. Although I'm not saying that like actual abuse doesn't happen, or that this is not an avenue for people who are damaging predators to sort of enact like genuine sadism without care for the people. And it's possible, like the cutting thing seems really weird. Like, my first thought is like, is she part of like a texting group of findoms where one findom was like, hey, my guy like really loves being cut. He's like paying me $1,000 to make me cut him. And then she's like, oh, maybe I should try that. This is like my first theory. But also my second theory is like, maybe she's just really like sadistic and fucked up and doesn't care about it at all. It sounds like that's the way he feels about it.
Yeah, well, so my reaction when I saw that and when I learned about this little world was like, okay, is this just some random one-off? Or is this a much bigger problem than perhaps a single video would indicate? And I think it's actually a much bigger problem. And the reason I think that is, well, there's a couple things. First, like any addiction, there's like a numbing effect, like with any drug, where a little bit doesn't work anymore. So you have to keep going higher and higher. But the other thing that's unique about this particular addiction, compared to any other addiction I can think of, is that, like, if you are addicted to Coke, say, or addicted to alcohol, first of all, more than just two people know about it. With findom, it's you and the dom and nobody else.
Yeah.
Second, with Coke or with alcohol, if your drug dealer has things to do. They have to launder the money, they have to get the product, they have to meet people. But with this particular addiction, the job of the dom, the full-time job, is to force relapse over and over and over again, because of the incentive structure here.
Yeah.
So it absolutely is something that both sides are asking for at the beginning, but then it starts ramping up, and the incentives are so perverse that both sides can't escape this twisted dyad that they find themselves in. And so part of the reason I want to bring this up is because I think you are uniquely situated to actually study this problem and figure out how much of a problem it actually is, compared to my kind of rather haphazard Reddit research. But from my Reddit research and just basic poking around, I guess there's 400 FAAs, Findom Addicts Anonymous, internationally, that have opened up over the last little while. And that I got from a different podcast. FetLife has banned it. And I think there's been a big rise of this over the last 4 or 5 years with the rise of OnlyFans.
Yeah, I want to emphasize your point by saying FetLife banning something is not trivial. FetLife doesn't ban things. FetLife is like maybe the most accepting thing on the internet for fetishes, and the only things they've banned are things that they're legally pressured to ban, like to not violate obscenity laws to get their website shut down. So the fact that FetLife banned a pay pig thing, that updates me quite a bit. I think that's like a really good sign that it's actually really damaging, or at least has that potential.
Yeah, I'm not 100%. So I was trying to analogize it to other addictions in my head, and I'm not totally on board with your claim that it's disanalogous to various addictive drugs, say, right? Like because you can just make the argument that, yeah, you're a drug dealer, so for some highly addictive methamphetamine or something, say, your drug dealer also has an incentive to try and sell you as much as possible, right? And to try and get you to like buy more and more of the drug. And you also, with various drugs, have this effect where you need, just because of your brain chemistry adapts to it after a certain point, you need more and more to sustain the same high, right? And so, yeah, so I guess, yeah, I'd criticize your claim that it's disanalogous to other kinds of addiction.
Reminds me of casino gambling.
Yeah, that's another good one, right? Like the casino is always open. It's always there for you to go and burn more and more money, right? So, obviously this isn't equivalent to a claim that this is an okay thing or a good thing or a healthy thing, etc. But it's unclear to me whether we should look at this as a unique kind of addictive situation or just sort of one among
Well,
many.
I think it would be
as callous as that sounds, maybe.
I think that if the drug dealer came to your house or messaged you at 4:00 in the morning with photos of a crack pipe, knowing that you're trying to quit, then it would be more analogous. But that kind of thing doesn't happen too often. Drugs are intrinsically addictive. And so when a drug dealer is giving drugs out, yeah, they're not going to stop you from coming back to them. That's kind of uncommon. But I don't think it's very common for a drug dealer to know that their client is actively trying to quit and then send them parcels, send them texts at 4:00 in the morning, do this thing called forced intox, which I guess is a terminology for when the dom forces the sub or suggests that the sub starts taking drugs. And I think another point where it's disanalogous to drug addiction or gambling addiction is the fact that it's so shameful and so underground and that nobody knows about it. And I think that's what makes it unique. But I want to come to the gambling thing and then move the conversation ever so slightly, because this made me update in slightly the opposite direction with regards to OnlyFans and camming and online stuff. And so I'd love to hear your pushback on this. So I grew up on Dan Savage. I grew up in kind of a liberal, escorting is fine, escorting is great, sex work is positive, female empowerment and taking charge of your own finances and don't be slut shamed. And that's all fantastic. But then I started thinking about findom as maybe one radical extreme, but I'm kind of viewing camming and to some extent OnlyFans as like bedroom casinos, because there is an addictive component as well, in the sense that to make like a slot machine addictive, you need to have ready access, you need randomized rewards, and you need frequent replay, right? And these three properties exist in camming land, at least that was what Joanna was telling me, and presumably in OnlyFans land as well.
What do you mean by randomized rewards, sorry, when it comes to...
Like one classic example is you write prizes on Jenga blocks, do a Jenga tower, people tip to have the cam girl pull out Jenga blocks, and then when it falls, you get something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, if we view it kind of as a casino, I don't think we should ban it. Casinos can bring a lot of joy and happiness to people, but I think there's an addictive component to it. And I think that I would just love to hear your reflections on the fact that there is some potential moral responsibility for the cammers and for the OnlyFans content creators to make sure that their clientele aren't overly addicted and spending more money than they can actually afford. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the relationship between online addiction and OnlyFans and camming.
Yeah, I would say there's like meaningful differences between OnlyFans and camming. Like there's very strong differences in the ways that payments are incentivized. I'd say that like the risk of the gambling thing is much higher when it comes to camming than it is OnlyFans. Like I would say OnlyFans is worse in some ways. I have a lot of complaints about like sort of the things it's doing to society. I still think it's worth it, to be clear. But camming specific, like, so when I've worked with a bunch of cam girls and with OnlyFans girls, like been in chats, lived in group houses. As a cam girl, it would often come up, be like, hey, I think that a guy who's tipping me is dipping into his like emergency life savings now. Like that was not an unheard of conversation. And then we'd have discussions about what to do about it. And generally, I mean, I'm not sure if I was in particularly good circles, but we would actually tell the guys, like, stop. Like, I knew girls who would issue moratoriums, like, you're not allowed to come to my room, you're banned for a month.
That's great.
Or something. And this just makes me think there might be a selection effect with findom. Like, maybe the girls who aren't willing to do that are the kinds of girls that end up graduating findom. But at least when I was working as a cam girl, this was widespread among all the girls who I knew who were doing it. But the thing is they had to do it, right? There were guys who were trying to do this thing. You keep running into guys. And I think this is part of the way that camming is structured. But I have never heard of a single person having to do this with OnlyFans. OnlyFans is just a completely different financial structure. OnlyFans is also less gamified than camming.
Okay.
Because with camming, it's like really highly competitive, and you do have the randomized games like the Jenga thing. You get like the little roulette wheels that you spin. But OnlyFans even has some rules against things you can post that make those kinds of games easier. Like, even just like what you can tip for to get things. Tip menus are like, I need to remember what the exact rules are on them right now, but there's been some gray area. It's also just less like good platform to build games on in general because it's not very live. This is a very like you're looking at a feed that already exists. And yes, girls like will text you throughout the night, but this isn't like a randomized reward game cycle. You probably would hate drips. Now drips are kind of fucked. But that's
what are drips? What are drips?
Drips are like where a girl will get you horny and then slowly extract money out of you, and it's not even a findom thing. It's where like she'll send you up like mass message, and this OnlyFans is constructed to make this easier. Like the system of OnlyFans, you can do so. You send basically a mass message. I'm talking and walking. I'm sure my speed down so I don't breathe as hard. Basically, you send a mass message, like a free message to everybody who's subscribed, like, hey, you up, or whatever. And then like a certain percentage of those will respond. Then you can unsend the message to people who didn't respond. So if you wake up later, you don't get to see that message.
Oh, wow.
And then of the people that respond, you can send like a nude or like you horny, whatever. And then you can like basically filter it down. And then you send like a photo of you. You get them hard basically with like some teasing stuff. And you send a really cheap photo or video of you like, you know, escalating like $2, $5. They pay that, and then you just it's a series of escalating costs. So it's like $5, $10, and then the final money shot where you like come or whatever is like 20 or 30.
To be clear, so it's not that I hate OnlyFans or hate camming. It's more that all of the other criticisms I've heard of these platforms are more along the lines of this is destroying society, and none of that I found persuasive at all. But treating it not as we either need to ban the thing or let it just be what it is, but treating it more as let's just be cognizant of some of the negative consequences and how can we change the conversation or change the practices and the norms of each individual content creator and each individual cammer such that we mitigate these risks as much as possible. So I'm much more talking in terms of let's just acknowledge that there is addictive potential that, unlike with porn, can cause financial ruin or financial hardship. And just like with a casino where like my closest friend, they got married and then the after party was at a casino, and casinos can bring a lot of joy to people's lives. And so I wouldn't want to prohibit casinos, but we want to kind of tune the dials such that we can maximize the enjoyment and mitigate the harms. And I think acknowledging that there is addictive potential and that the incentives are such that the content creators want people to give as much money as they possibly can. And they probably aren't as incentivized to find those who are unable to bear the load financially. Then it's more of a question of how do we reform it, right? And so that's kind of my question to you is what kind of reforms do you think could take place on all these platforms such that we mitigate these kinds of harms given the difficult incentive structure?
So for example, most sex work has moved from camming to OnlyFans. Like camming, you get a very few amount of people pay most of your money. It's like a very exponential distribution. But OnlyFans, most people are paying a very small amount. It's very, 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 very rare to get one guy who is 90% of your income. It's very rare to extract lots of money from one guy. Typically, it's like, I think my average income per user for a while was like $30. Like that was, and like the highest guy was maybe $400 a month. It's
nice.
it's completely different. So the industry is already naturally, I would not really be that concerned about the financial doming specifically with OnlyFans. OnlyFans is bad for other reasons. Like I think that escorting is the best. Escorting just psychologically is fantastic. Incentive wise, it's the least likely to lead to bad outcomes. I mean, besides murder, but besides that,
sure.
So
just the
I don't
small
know.
issue of murder.
It sounds like probably most financial domination is happening through like text and Cash App, because you can't transact large amounts through most of the platforms. They have a cap. The highest amount of money you can send on OnlyFans, I think, is $200 at a time. And if you want to like raise your limit on my free cams, for example, you had to go through a whole annoying process. Basically, anytime I was trying to get a high payment, it was just a pain in the ass. So my guess is this is probably happening through Cash App, and it's probably like do it through like some sort of forum thing. And my guess is this, like, I would not really be that worried about OnlyFans for that reason.
Yeah. So to clarify, there's kind of two things that I'm interested in getting more information about, just in general. And one is just the incentive structure for OnlyFans, how it differs from camming, and what you said is actually great to know that it's much less of a gamified system, because I was maybe conflating these two things. But the second is like the funnel and the onboarding and the act of going from not paying online to paying online. And so people who browse Reddit typically don't pay, then they make the switch to paying. And once the credit card is in, then you've made the switch. And presumably a lot of them, $30, $20, that's totally fine. But then you hear the search term findom, and then you go onto Twitter. And so I guess Twitter is the place where this takes place the most. And if you want to see something particularly horrifying, type in Twitter, findom, relapse. And it's the only thing where relapse is glorified, where there's like, I've made my sub relapse today, and relapse is like a good thing compared to any
it's
other.
It's probably a kink thing, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm struggling a little bit with the word kink and fetish in the context of findom, because I think that it's a bit of a euphemism when it's being used to address self-harm behavior. I think that if my kink or my fetish was like, I can't get off until I financially ruin like a friend of mine, we wouldn't call that a kink. We'd call that like sociopathic behavior. But for whatever reason, when it's self-directed, all of a sudden it's a kink. And so I struggle with calling that a kink in this particular case, not in every case, but in this particular case, I think it can be a bit of a euphemism. So.
Yeah, I mean, so like I have a rape kink.
So no, I think it's different in the sense that like when you do CNC parties or consensual non-consent, you're consenting in the meta space, right?
Right. And I'm saying there's ethical and unethical ways to do the kink that I have. There's ethical and unethical ways to do a wide variety, like age play, for example. Don't rape a kid, but have an adult dress up and pretend. And I'm saying, I'm saying that the findom and relapse thing can be a kink, and it probably you can do it in an ethical or unethical way. And you could be arguing that like the majority of the way that it's practiced is unethical. And like maybe this is true, I don't know. But I'm like very careful to like wrap up something that somebody can practice ethically into being necessarily unethical just because a lot of people aren't doing it the right way.
Yeah, so that's an excellent point. So maybe we can get off the subject because I know there's a lot of other questions, but just to close the loop on that. So I was listening to a couple like old school DOMs. They talked about how findom can absolutely be done ethically. And so the way that it typically looks when it's done ethically is, first of all, it's in person. And second of all, the DOM actually cares a lot about the subs, like long-term finances. And there's aftercare. And so after like a certain period of play, then there's just like a human connection. Let's just check in, making sure that both sides are enjoying it. And there's actual care and concern and consideration. And so it absolutely can be done that way. But when there's a flood of 19 to 23-year-olds who are just looking to make a quick buck, and then there's another flood of like 45-year-olds who, at least with this, again, particular fetish, like from all of the interviews I've listened to, most of the men who are doing it because they're pretty sad inside. And I don't think that applies to other fetishes. I think that is unique to this one. And so, yes, it can be done ethically. And in that sense, it absolutely is a proper kink. But I think that this online nature and the age dynamic and the fact that the financial incentives are such that who gives a shit about the aftercare and actually caring about this other person is what's making it much more of a serious problem.
You know, I can check. I measure findom in my data, and I also measure like other personality questions. Maybe not how happy you are, but I measure like I feel powerless. I can check to see if there's correlation. Yeah,
I'd love to see that, but I'm also worried that like I would be surprised if your social circle or people who follow you on Twitter people who like read long form blogs are going to be the kinds of people who are into this particular kind of.
I think that this is a fair critique. However, the survey that I'm referencing went viral well outside my circles, and
awesome, cool,
has
that's great.
650,000 respondents.
Heck yeah! Oh, please, I'd love to know more about this. So.
Yeah. Okay, actually, I have somewhat related though separate question. So this sort of criticism, what have you, it evokes the response that there are several ways to deal with undesirable outcomes in a society. One is to like regulate it, right? So you just say like certain behaviors or certain platforms, et cetera, are just off limits. And another one is just to enforce certain cultural norms. And arguably, this is what we've done and what we should do when it comes to other things that have both positive and negative components. So drugs and alcohol come to mind, right? And ideally, I want the government involved very little in our choices about drug and alcohol consumption. And I think that's a place where we leave it up to cultural norms of like when and where are appropriate places. And you let people learn with friends and family and whatnot. For cultural norms to be effective, you want the behavior to be publicly discussable as much as possible, right? So it's arguably, we're a relatively good society when it comes to something like alcohol consumption because it's a very normalized behavior. And so most people, by the time they hit their like early 20s, late teens, understand the various dangers of a lot of alcohol consumption and don't do it in ways that are drastically unhealthy. Obviously, there's some caveats here, but that's sort of a perfect world. So one could make a similar claim when it comes to sex work and stuff and say that a lot of the pernicious effects need to be regulated by certain cultural norms. To do that, you might need that things be more publicly discussable, right? And arguably, we're in a place where there's still a lot of cultural pressure sort of working against sex work and in such a way that it's making it hard to discuss various issues. But so my question, I guess, is that are there cultural norms, Aella, that you think should be enforced in the world of sex work that aren't? Or like what sort of norms would you like to see be more prominent that aren't? Or are there norms that you think are actually working against both clients and customers, et cetera? Or like, I guess, and even more generally, are there ways in which you'd like to see the industry change?
I mean, yeah, like a lot of it is downstream from legality. Like I would love a norm where we make it more bad to assault a sex worker, but like it's like kind of weird to say it's bad to assault a sex worker, but the primary issue around that is it's dangerous for a sexual worker to report an assault to the police. So it's like it's kind of weird. I mean,
I see.
And there's a lot of stigma against like sex workers being drug addict users or something. But the thing is, a lot of them are. This is in fact a true correlation, and which I think is downstream of the fact that sex work is so stigmatized. Because only people willing to break a stigma are going to do that. And if you're willing to break a stigma in one way, so you're probably willing to break it in others. So it's like a weird kind of thing where like I would love certain things like I get to join a social group without being excluded as, contributing to the fabric of society, right? But it's downstream from this terrible cycle where like we're creating a situation that reinforces the narratives we have, that reinforces our justification for the stigma, which is a big problem. But like, I would like, I do think like more discussion on ethics around sex work would be great. Like at what point are we actually doing harmful things for someone else? Like my cam girls would always have this debate, but it wasn't a settled debate. Be like, at what point is it too far? I would love for it to be a wider debate where it's like, hey, check for these key traits. Is the guy like this red flag or this red flag? So we all have sort of a thing to go to, like a well-known set. That would be great too. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling.
Yeah, I think in addition to legalities and like regulation and norms, I think that a third category, which is arguably new given the online nature of a lot of these transactions, are design choices. So one thought that I had with regards to potential addiction for camming sites or for OnlyFans, and I cannot believe I'm going to say this phrase on podcast, but post-nut clarity is a real thing. And so if in these moments there's a button that you could press that would permanently block your credit card without any, do you want to sign off? And are you sure you want to leave? These kinds of things. It would be a very simple design choice that could be made for a lot of these sites that could allow those who feel like they're spending more than they can afford to quickly ban themselves in the same way that a casino allows a casino to ban someone's ID, for example. And so I think design choices are maybe a third way into this subject that could be potentially easier to change.
This is a quick side note. I think that this is probably, I just want to say that I think what you're saying is like a reasonably good idea. But But a quick side note, would you like to predict in my data set, I have around 200,000 males that responded, most of them quite young, mostly from TikTok, a generally relatively good sample of the U.S. Western population, so we know who we're talking about. Would you like to predict what percentage of males reported clicked yes for interest in financial domination?
I'm going to say, so 200,000, I'm going to say 0.1%.
0.5%?
5.8%.
Whoa.
Wow.
A lot higher than I thought, too.
Much higher.
Yeah. And to be clear, this is
5%.
like any interest, so it's possible we're capturing a lot of guys with only like a slight interest. But still, even including that, it is higher than I thought. 5.8.
So how does that compare to, can we use another kink like foot fetish as a comparison?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Yeah. I love that you have data
This is
at
awesome.
your fingertips.
Just live
This is
data.
amazing.
This is the best.
Yeah, let's do like foot fetish and like maybe a boobs fetish or something as a way to compare.
Okay.
And then
I just have
scat
to-
play. Let's do scat play on the one side and then foot and boobs on the other side to
Okay.
compare. Yeah.
We should actually guess the people who clicked feet, men. So I'm looking at males right now, just to be clear.
Yeah. Feet, 10%.
14.6.
I'm going to go with also. Yeah. 10%
Sorry, I'm
pretty
sorry.
good,
I wasn't sure if you were going to guess or not.
Oh, sorry. What'd you say? I missed it.
Oh, you didn't hear it? That's great. What was your guess then?
I'll say 12%.
What did I just say? Sorry, I'm like jumping around my code.
Yeah, no worries.
It's 14.6.
Okay, so it's a third as popular as foot fetishes.
Mm-hmm. And then what other one did you want me to check?
Scat maybe would be at the very like the least, or necrophilia or something that's like super uncommon.
Wait, someone fill me in on scat. What?
Well,
it's
which type of scat? We have a lot of different subtypes. Other people eating scat.
I got you. I figured it out. I inferred.
I'm trying to see if I just have a straight scat.
Maybe choose something that's just we can use as a control for like the very, very unpopular kind of fetish which still
Necrophilia.
exists. Necrophilia, yeah.
Okay.
That's always a good one, right?
Do you know what the most unpopular one is actually? Is it easy?
It depends on. It depends. It's an infinite fractal into specification.
I see. Oh,
Okay. The problem is I have too many subcategories of necrophilia. It's like necrophilia fresh, necrophilia rotting.
Holy shit.
Let's check necrophilia fresh. Okay.
1 to 2 day old. Yeah.
If I remember correctly, most necrophiles prefer fresh. Of necrophiles, 94% prefer it new. So I have 1,100 different like items, and I have to like remember which item referred to. But let's see, a pedophilia is a one that I can look up. 3.7% of males reported any interest in pedophilia.
That's fascinating. So we could say that findom is more popular than pedophilia, and about a third as popular as foot fetishes. And we don't know the percentage of findoms, people who've responded positively to findom, who would also say this is something I wish I wasn't into, or something that is like a negative impact in my life, which to me would be how I would distinguish between those who are addicted and maybe those who are not.
I just sent you a link to one of my Substack posts where it's charted. So you can see a whole bunch of fetishes. So financial domination looks like it's around interest in like frequency, around interest in like gender transformation, painful toys, clinical cold/medical scenarios, breast implants, brother-sister incest, breast milk. It's about as popular as those.
Fascinating. Yeah, this is like I've been rabbit holing so hard on this, so this is excellent, more quantifiable data based on my. The only thing I was doing is comparing search terms, so like findom addiction, gambling addiction, etc. But like I would encourage you guys and the listeners offline to just read some of the posts when you Google Reddit findom addiction. They are horrifying.
I'm definitely going to read that after this.
Yeah, like
it's rare that actually I'm talk to someone who brings me new information about like a fetish subculture. So
yeah,
very good. I'm very thankful.
We are recording after some technical difficulties. I think that some data correlations have come in, and we've learned a little bit in the last 5 minutes. So I don't know, Aella, if you want to summarize what has been said over the last couple minutes.
Because when I have to look at the data, it's not very exciting. I'm just like staring at the screen and like pressing buttons. So then I'm like, oh, I'll just wait to do that. But then stuff starts coming in. I do. Okay. Well, so there's a thing. Wait.
So I think maybe just as you're looking this up, so we're back to the findom conversation. Sorry, listeners, but I was speculating that there's a correlation between those who are into findom and those who have a low sense of self-worth and perhaps even a broken childhood. And I wouldn't say that about other forms of dominance and submission, and I wouldn't say that about other fetishes. So it's not a blanket statement about rape fetishes or just being a sub in general. I think it's specifically to this one. And my speculation is that it's about that it feels good to have your identity validated. And for certain men who feel have such a low sense of self-worth that they'll actually pay for the experience of having that identity validated. And then Aella, I think when we lost feed, was expressing skepticism about that view because I think that can be said about a bunch of different things. And then so we looked to the data, and that's kind of the setup.
Yeah, so I started looking up people who report being abused or not. Like, does this affect? Does this predict interest in financial domination? And it seems to be the case. Like, people who are interested in financial domination report like 10% higher levels of anxiety. Oh wait, yeah, it was 10%. More likely to report being abused in childhood. More likely to report being spanked more in childhood. But I do also want to caveat, I had checked another thing. People who are abused in childhood are more likely to report greater interest in fetishes across the board.
In general.
So there's the general fetish index, general fetish factor or whatever is increased. So this could probably explain part of, I think I'd be surprised just glancing at the numbers. I'd be surprised if it explained all of it. But it's possible that like you're just more likely to see general abnormal sexuality, which again, I think it's a decent theory that like we're having some sort of emotional coping that happens quite early. I also think it's possible that it's genetic, that like deviance in general creates strange fetishes and also causes a parent to abuse their kids more at a slightly higher rate, and you're likely to pass those genes on to a kid.
Right.
Who knows? Nobody knows. I just want to be clear that nobody knows what the fuck is happening, and I regularly come across data that just doesn't seem to validate previous theories that sounded really good. So we're shitting out of our mouths here. But these are theories, and I think this is like a decent hypothesis that you have that like maybe this is some sort of coping mechanism for feeling powerless.
The line "general fetish factor" may be the best sentence that's ever been said on this podcast. What's leading to the overall increase in the general fetish factor? Jeez.
So maybe the last question, because we want to be conscientious of your time, is that you're starting a journal, which is a wildly cool thing to do. And I'm so interested to know, first of all, why? Like, what's the benefit of starting a journal? Isn't it just a huge amount of administrative overhead? And also how it's going.
Well, hopefully it's not a huge amount of administrative overhead based on how we're trying to do it. Like, science is ridiculous as it's currently done in journals. It's just absolutely, the incentives are stupid. Then like the way that I want to do it is like based on like a lot of rationalist principles. So we want to use prediction markets to predict whether or not a paper is going to replicate. So we have people betting money, which I think they'll be much more properly incentivized to get to the truth of something versus a bunch of peer reviewers who don't give a shit. So you'll be able to read papers.
Like the
and
authors
just
betting money, sorry?
Anybody at all can bet money. In general, so I don't know how much you know about prediction markets, but they tend to be quite accurate. They tend to beat out super forecasters. So
listen to our episodes shitting on super forecasters because
you have one?
We have some strong opinions on super forecasting.
Are they? Have I been lied to? Are they actually worse than I think?
They're just marginally better than random.
Also, there's some issues with the scoring methods and like binary forecasting, and there's some technical issues that I think are worth taking into account.
I rarely want to listen to podcasts, but I would listen to that.
Well, so the whole backstory of our podcast is Ben and Vaden going through a lot of rationalist ideas and wrestling with them. So
my journal is based on a lot of rationalist ideas, to be clear, like the prediction market thing.
Yeah, but why not just financially incentivize the authors to have replicable research? Like pay them more if it replicates.
Well, so there's a lot of other stuff. Like it helps determine which papers are in need of replication. Also, because like if the market's 50-50 on a paper replicating, you might be like, well, this is worth looking into. And if the market's like 99%. It's probably
but you'll
not
be collecting papers because this will only apply to the papers
directly to do it. So basically, I'm hiring academics or whoever to do this. So I do have to be judicial with money.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, nice.
And so, when do we expect the journal to be launched?
Not sure. Well, we were waiting for numerical markets on Manifold because we're using Manifold, And I think they either are working on it or are coming out with it soon. And then there's a bunch of technical details, which is quite hard. Like, how do you determine what a paper replicates? What if you have another paper that like claims to replicate, but the second paper is in fact worse than the first? So instead of actually rating replication, you should probably be having how much does it update a hypothesis? But then like you have to be unclear, like how much did the paper actually contribute to updating the hypothesis? So it like becomes, I think there's like a way to do it, but it's like kind of tricky. And I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes in my first attempt. I'm just going to try it and be like, and then we'll just iterate and then hopefully get better.
Love it.
So is there a notion of a paper being published in the journal? So like someone submits it and then you put it on the, like it's public, presumably people read it, they bet on whether it's going to replicate. Is that paper published in the meantime, or do you wait until it passes some confidence threshold on the market and then publish it?
I want to publish bad papers. I want to let the system separate what is good versus bad. I am happy to be fair, I am paying people to do it. So at some point my judgment is in it. I would like to sort of figure out a better way of making that decision. But right now we're starting small scale. I'm just going to pick people, and I'm like, there's some people who want to publish papers that I think are shit and are not going to replicate at all. But I would like to witness that as a test of if this system works well. Another part is like I want to do sex research stuff, which we just don't have a lot of that. So it's like like right now my niche, I would like to start out focusing on publishing papers that can't be published elsewhere. Very much. It's like, what can you not get funded to do? I want to fund you to do that.
I see. So it's like the Journal of Controversial Ideas plus Manifolds Market plus a bit of Yukowski, Bayesian stuff on top.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I did look around at other things, and I forget what I looked at, but everything that people told me to look at just didn't feel like it was suitable for what I was trying to do. So,
well, hell yeah. Can't wait to read some of the stuff that's coming out of it. And thank you so much for the generosity of your time and getting real live answers about data sets.
Yeah, that was awesome.
We can never do that kind of shit. That's the coolest thing ever. So I really appreciate that. Yeah.
We all know more about findom than we anticipated at the beginning of this conversation. So
thanks for having me. This was a lovely discussion.
Awesome. To be continued.